Part one is TPR, or total physical response. You're going to hear this a lot, so if you're taking notes, I highly recommend you write down what this acronym stands for. TPR is essentially acting like a bit of a mime, using charades to get the kids to understand what you're talking about. So there are many opportunities you are going to find for using TPR in your lessons. Things like key verbs. So if you're talking about running, do like a running motion with it. If you're talking about swimming, show them how you swim. Get them to do it too. If you're talking about adjectives, it's nice if you have a rolling chair. You can show things like being really, really, really big and roll back, and then roll forward really, really, really small, and show them and interact and move with this camera as well. So that's a big one. If you've studied theater, you might be familiar with the term of breaking the fourth wall, which is when the actor will turn to the audience and address them. And I kind of like to think of these classes as something similar. The fourth wall in our case is the computer screen and the wall between us there. But you want to make it feel like there's no barrier. That's essential. So use the camera to interact with it and show emotions, show instructions, show animal sounds. You want to show me being really, really happy, give me a big smile, and have them show you right up in the camera. You can show them 1, 2, 3 for instructions and have them show you what number question you're on as well. If you're doing reach, you're going to be having a lot of younger students, so you're going to make a lot of ridiculous animal sounds, probably, if you're feeling up to it. I always like to think that if I feel like a bit of a clown, I'm doing the right job and I'm on track. But feel free to just be ridiculous, make animal sounds. I am sure that all my neighbors hear me mooing at about 3 in the morning, and they are very confused as to what goes on in this apartment over here. But don't be shy. Do what you need to do. And then that finally camera interaction that I was talking about before, really get up in there. You're going to give them high fives. I'll talk about that during encouragement as well. But really point at the camera, indicate, and just show them that there's no space between you, really. This is as good as a physical classroom. So some things to consider as you're creating your TPR dictionary is that you should assign specific TPR to specific words. And essentially what I mean by this is that what you're creating is a kinetic vocabulary. So it's a crude form of sign language, if you will, and as such it's important to be consistent, because as you're assigning a certain word a certain motion, so for example, house, you don't really want to do it like this next time, even though it's very similar, because maybe this means something different to the student than what this means. So just make sure you're always being consistent with what your movements are. And I mean, that's easier for you too, because it means you have to think of less motions to go along with it. And this is highlighted in yellow for a very special reason, but you should get the student involved. This is so important. I can't stress that enough, but especially during your final demos, we're going to be looking if you're involving the student as well in your TPR. So it's great if you're doing all the actions and you're showing all that camera interaction and you're doing all the facial expressions and using your voice modulation. But if the student is sitting there like this and they're not joining in, you're not going to be creating that engaging and energetic classroom for the student. So encourage them to join in. And if they're being a bit reluctant, my favorite trick is to tell them to show me your hands. And they'll be like, all right, teacher. And they'll show me their hands. They'll know what's coming. But if I then tell them to do this for house, they're already halfway engaged. So once from here, it's much easier to do this than if they're not moving at all. So use that trick. Show me your hands. Really helpful, I promise. And finally, just a side note, be culturally aware. So this is like the equivalent of don't give them the finger. It's very important that you are familiar with just certain things that might be rude or not. The two main ones are pointing directly tends to be a little bit rude. So it's very natural for us to point, because that's just our cultural way of indicating you or me or that over there. But you want to try to use your full finger gesture for this circumstance. So try to not say, what did you do today? Try to be like, what did you do today? As an open-handed gesture. And then the other one is, you don't want to do this if you're like, come here, pulling upwards. And you definitely don't want to do this, which even in English is a little bit come hither and a little bit creepy. So you want to scoop down. Come here. come here. Or bring me your mom. Bring me your toys. Bring me your sister. Something like that. Because when you do upward, that's how they call dogs over, and it's indicating that you think they are also a dog. So it's just a little bit of a cultural difference there. I am sure there are plenty of YouTube videos out there if you want to familiarize yourself with a few more things to avoid and things to note.